Good morning, Inman. How are we all doing this morning? We're good. You got to do better than that. How are we doing this morning? Yeah, that's better. How many of you have really enjoyed your Inman experience so far? How many of you are here for the first ever time at Inman? I'm one of those. There's a number of you out there. Okay, this number is going to be a little bit smaller. How many of you are still in your first year of real estate? There's a handful of you. There's someone clapping back there. That's excellent. Well, I also am in my first year of real estate, but we'll get to that later on. I want to start with a little bit of a childhood story. Back in the early 90s, a flood of refugees began arriving in my hometown of Glasgow, Scotland. The government hadn't prepared particularly well for them. They simply handed them keys to damp apartments in neighborhoods where, quite frankly, they faced real hostility and at times genuine violence. Both my parents have been in real estate for years and years and years, and they saw an opportunity here to just serve these people, to do much of what Platon had talked about earlier in just sharing empathy towards them, knowing that they'd been through immense struggle. A byproduct of that was my sister and I had the opportunity to learn that not everybody's life goes as smoothly as predicted. In fact, here's a picture of me loading a moving van as we helped a family move into their new apartment. Now, I know you've had the world's best photographer up here this morning. It's not quite at that standard, but that was an opportunity for me at a very young age to begin to learn to serve refugees and those in need. One of those families we became particularly close friends with, a family who've given me permission to share their story with you this morning. Hamit, Malachi, and their children fled their native Albania in the midst of civil war, where, for the simple fact that they followed a certain faith, their formerly friendly neighbors turned on them completely, destroying their home, executing their livestock, and even shooting at them as they fled for their lives, wounding their youngest daughter as she ran. Somehow they made it over the mountains in the middle of the Albanian winter, and even more miraculously made it to the United Kingdom, where they were sent up to Glasgow with nothing, merely the clothes on their backs, speaking no English, and having experienced a trauma that as a child I couldn't even begin to comprehend what they'd been through. As the years passed by, we grew up together, and then our paths diverged. I left home when I was 16, and I moved to Vancouver, Canada, where I've now lived for 10 years at the age of 20. Until last October, when our paths crossed again. It seems that every year I'm back in Scotland visiting my family. I'm in that season of life where someone's getting married, someone's getting engaged, someone's having a baby, someone's graduating something. And so every year I'm back. And every time I go back, I go and with my dad, we take in a soccer game at our local soccer team. We've been going to these games ever since I was what we would call a wee boy. His dad took him, his dad took him, his dad took him, and it's become quite the tradition for us. We always go for a couple of pints beforehand, at least since I became an adult. I've got to be careful with that. And we always go for fish and chips afterwards. But this evening was a little bit different. My dad chose to take us to a chippy, that's our word for a fish and chip restaurant, that I'd never been to before. We walk in the door, and the man behind the counter's face just lights up into the biggest smile as he yells my dad's name at the top of his lungs, "Michael!" And he runs towards us both, and he grabs my dad, and he just holds him. He holds him for a while. It turns out that was Hamit in the restaurant that my lawyer dad had helped him purchase using his legal skills, advocating for them all these years after they helped them settle in their new hometown of Glasgow, Scotland. Malachi, his wife, then hears all the commotion outside and runs out from the kitchen as well. Exact same reaction, big smile, yells my dad's name, gives him a big hug, doesn't let him go. And then for the next hour, at least after they've worked out who's going to pick up the bill, there was a lot of fighting over that, they just shared story after story of all that they had accomplished, all that they had achieved in spite of the incredibly challenging and traumatic start that they'd had to their life in their new home country. Hamit and Malachi had purchased that restaurant, which had been a long-term goal of theirs, and they had every reason to be immensely proud of the restaurant. It was the cleanest chippy I'd been in my entire life. But really, the miraculous stories are the stories of the children. The oldest child, their oldest daughter, she made a commitment to herself when her little sister was shot as they fled, that she was going to put herself in a position where she could help injured and sick people. She made a commitment to herself as a child. I'm going to be a doctor wherever it is I land. Today, she is actually a doctor in Glasgow, Scotland. Their son, Nebly, their only son, he recently acted in a movie alongside Brad Pitt. You might have heard of him. And their youngest daughter, the one wounded by gunfire, she actually ended up settling in this great country, calling the United States of America home now. They're inspiring stories. They're miraculous stories. They're stories of hope. And they were the perfect story for me as I returned to Vancouver after my trip, because one of the elements of my business is I've been running an online show called The Local. And we'll tell stories of local businesses and nonprofits, stories that I believe are worth celebrating in our community and certainly worth advocating for. And I had the opportunity to interview a man by the name of Jamie McDonald, whose episode I'd like to share with you now.
My name's David Smith, and I'm a realtor with LePage Wolstencroft. I love the communities I get to serve and the stories that bind us together. The Local is the perfect avenue to share those stories with you.
But it's the compassion ethic that drives us.
It's the Good Samaritan.
Totally.
You don't. The person's faith doesn't matter. The person's background doesn't matter. You see a person that's in need. Yeah.
And it's seriously, what do you need, friend? How can I help you?
Today we meet some of Surrey's newest residents at New Hope, where refugees are helped to settle here in Canada.
That's cool. That's good.
Thanks so much for joining us, Jamie.
Thanks, David. Good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about New Hope. Where are we today? Where have you been in the past?
Okay.
What's your story?
Today, I'm in a 13-unit apartment building that New Hope operates as a residential community for refugee families coming to Canada.
And we got some of those families here with us today, running around out there, watching what's going on.
Yeah. We started in 2004 in East Vancouver as a not-for-profit, literally designed to provide housing and settlement help to incoming refugees. And over the years, we've actually placed over 400 men, women, and children into the Canadian community by helping them find housing, get some life skills, some English, that kind of thing. So, and our hope is that as families come to us, they live in this community for 12 to 24 months. And in that time, they move from their initial paralysis to productivity, because our goal is to get them to find their feet, get on their feet, get walking, and walk out the door.
And then flourish.
Yeah, and when they leave us, we consider it a success, and we celebrate it.
Yeah,
and
it's a graduation.
Totally.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, that's literally what my business is based on.
Yeah.
You know, people over property.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Because you do have to put people first.
Yeah.
And I see the same dedication to community, and you're exercising it in a really profound and exciting way. And I'm tearing up thinking about it, so I'm grateful.
This is your home.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a lovely day.
It's Muhammad, Ahmad, and Zakaria. What's that, Ragad? Ragad, come on.
Hi. How are you? Hi.
Do you like it? I have children too. You're welcome.
This is sleeping.
Our budget needs have been met by people giving to us from all kinds of sectors. The city of Surrey has been good to us. We just really have had a lot of help, and we don't get anywhere without a lot of people helping us. So if people want to help, we'd be glad to receive their help.
Yeah, and I'd love for them to help you as well.
Yeah,
and I hope
you.
I'm able to help in the future too in many, many ways.
Quite the powerful story, I'm sure you'll agree. One of the seemingly universal responses to that video has been to be emotionally moved, and people can understand why. For me, when I held that young boy in my arms, I could see my own son's face, as I considered these are men, women, and children just like you and I. In fact, that has been the response that we've seen from many, many people. We did have a physical premiere of that episode and a number of other episodes too, where we invited local dignitaries and press, including the mayor of our city. She wept, and I hope she's not going to watch this. She wept as she watched that episode and then listened to me talk afterwards about my heart for our community. She ran up to us afterwards and said, how can we as a city come alongside and support you further? Since then, New Hope have had the opportunity to distribute that video to many of their supporters. In fact, it's in the signature, the email signature of every single email that Jamie McDonald sends. And so the video is just getting out there to tell their story. Now, as most people on this platform ask at some point, what's all this got to do with real estate? And to answer that question, I have to let you in on a little secret. That episode premiered before I'd even sold a single home. 2 years ago, I suffered a breakdown. A proper breakdown, a buck-naked, fetal position on the floor breakdown. It really launched me into a major vocational change. I moved from being a pastor of a church into real estate. In that season of our life, we lost everything. We lost our home. We lost our life savings. We lost my career. We lost the value of my education. Nobody wants to hire a guy with a divinity degree. We lost our community, which was a significant loss to us. And in truth, full transparency, we nearly lost our marriage, which would have meant the intimate relationship I have with my kids. I have 2 young children and another that we're expecting in 3 weeks. And so I want to thank my wife for letting me be here with you today. We really did nearly lose everything. And I thought, what a great time to get into real estate. So many of you will know that Vancouver has been one of the hottest real estate markets on the planet over the last few years. Unfortunately, when I got my license, I realized that the government was taking some steps to quell that. Mortgage regulations at the federal level were tightened up massively. There was a foreign buyer tax that was implemented, and they tried to just squash the market. The market froze like a deer in the headlights, and I did the same. All of a sudden, we just lost all the money that we ever had. I just got my license, and there wasn't a transaction to be found. But I knew if I was going to build my business, I was going to build it my way. And I'll spare you the Frank Sinatra song. The reason that I wanted to build my business my way was that I wanted to be known for advocating for others the way that I'd seen my parents do, rather than always advocating for myself. You know, unfortunately, in many of our marketplaces, realtors are detested. Some of you will have experienced that. In the eyes of the public, we're seen as predatory, as flashy, as selfish, only out for ourselves instead of being out for our communities. And I wanted to do something different. But that expectation still existed. I was being judged very, very harshly by the people in my life, saying, how can you go from being Pastor David to being that guy? And my response was pretty simple. Well, I'm not. I'm going to build my business differently, advocating for others instead of myself. Now, I haven't just advocated for local refugees, but also for other local businesses. The show has featured a local skyscraper development, a local gym where they have this connection between elite athletes and at-risk youth. Ladies, you may have noticed there was actually in the intro to the episode there another lady throwing a box of tampons in the air. I don't know if you noticed that. That was an awkward one for me to film. But there were 3 lady entrepreneurs that have this monthly box model where at that time of the month, you get organic feminine hygiene products along with some chocolates and bath bombs and that kind of thing. And we wanted to celebrate them as well. They're now down in San Francisco as part of an accelerator program. We celebrated a local hockey team, a local childcare facility. You name it, we've covered them. And so we've really sought to become advocates for others in our community, and they've responded to us by advocating for me similarly. Now, I want to ask you a few questions to determine who are you going to advocate for. I'm not arrogant enough to think, first-year agent, I'm the only one doing this. The reality is there are incredible people in this industry that have been doing this kind of thing for longer than I've been alive. But there are others of you in this room that simply need to leave with the permission to go and advocate for others. Maybe this is a sentence that you weren't expecting to hear at Inman this morning. Maybe you don't always have to focus on the most dollar-productive activities. Maybe you actually have the chance to focus on the things that bring you joy and fulfillment as you serve and advocate for other people. And so ask yourself a few questions. What do you bleed for? What must you share? What's going to take you from taking that risky step of just resharing something on Facebook to actually commenting yourself on it? What are you going to take risks for? Because if you think that covering refugees in the environment that I was in at the time culturally was a non-risky thing to do, you were kidding yourself. That episode was released in the context of a certain presidential hopeful who will go nameless. I want to come back to your country. I really like it here. Saying that all Muslims were going to be banned from this country. And that episode dropped in the context of that environment where there was a real and tangible fear. It was a risky step. What are you willing to take risks for in your advocacy for others? Maybe it's a local business. Maybe it's your local barbecue shop, your local gym. Maybe it's a charity, your local food bank, your local soup kitchen, your local shelter. Maybe it's a cause, a cure for cancer, fundraising for a family, even supporting the veterans. I'm not going to let you put me in one of those North American boxes of you're either conservative or liberal, because ultimately this isn't even about me. This isn't about what I advocate for. This is about what you advocate for. And I'd love to call you all, before you leave this week, to just decide in your mind, I'm going to go home and I'm going to advocate for these people. For me, I want to remain an advocate of local business, but I especially want to remain an advocate of New Hope. I want to see their model multiplied across our city and perhaps even beyond, so that we can help more and more refugees get settled, learn the language, get a job, and turn into the kind of flourishing citizens that Jamie has sent 400 people through and that I saw Hamit, Malechi, and their children become. I won't advocate for myself on this stage, but I will advocate for them. If that's something that interests you, I'd love to hear from you, because that's the way I want to build my business, around them, not around myself. Thank you.